be an exciting conversation too. But Nate, we've gotten to the part of the show where we're going to be talking about some choices. What made you want to bring this up and talk about this today?
I just playing Deadfire. Because one of the main things I enjoyed about it was the dialogue choices in terms of how people reacted to how you spoke, but also little choices that you make throughout the game that make like not only a visible impact but like a gameplay impact on the rest of the game. And it just kind of got me thinking about other games that did the same thing, games that don't. Some games make you think that like you're making a choice, but no matter what you do, the same thing happens.
Yeah.
So I just kind of wanted to get your guys' opinion on that. What are some of your favorite games, that have made you choose? Some that are like memorable, stuff like that. I asked some of my other friends. Everybody said Mass Effect.
Yeah, that's kind of the first one that comes up.
That's not a game that I played. I lost to the elevator boss in the first game. I was like, nope, not into this game enough to put up with this. I was thinking about all the elevators I would have to play. I'd have to sit throughout the rest of the game, and I stopped. I couldn't do it. But I am familiar with the world and like, especially like Mass Effect 2
and the Citadel.
3 and like and the stuff that happens.
Well, I think the thing about Mass Effect was people were so invested in the fact that their choices did matter, and then at the end of it amounted to 3 small differentiating things that wasn't really a choice. Ultimately, the same thing was going to happen no matter what you did, and I think that's why there was so much disgruntled rage from the Mass Effect community, was because it wasn't. I made all of these choices to do something good, and overall it means nothing, which is kind of something about life, but ultimately not something that people want in their games. Stacey, was there any that came to mind for you?
Yeah, so I have really conflicted feelings about games where your choices matter, because I'm the kind of person who wants to explore every timeline and every opportunity. There's actually one game, a ridiculous little game where your choices make the game is about your choices.
Oh, okay.
It's this little indie game called Long Live the Queen.
Okay.
And it's not like a walk around game. It's literally just it's a magical girl princess game.
Okay.
Basically, and you just choose different like skills for her to brush up on, and there's a story that you follow, and you build up your skills as you go. You can choose, to study your courtly manners or your foreign intelligence or magic, or you can like become versed in the occult. And as you move through the story, well, you need certain skills to survive, otherwise you die horrifically.
And you don't know that until it's like, hey, you're going to die.
So you could be the most well-versed courtly princess with the best manners in the world, who knows the history of her country better than anyone in the world. But 20 weeks in, if you get a box of chocolates and you did not study, your presence with dogs and your ability to handle dogs, and they don't alert you that there's poison in that chocolate, you're dead.
All right.
It's terrible.
And that's just
wonderful.
Game over?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a brutal game, but these choices, you craft the kind of person you want this little princess become queen to be.
I know what you're talking about. It's like a mobile game, right?
Essentially.
Yeah.
But it's
it like a visual novel?
That's a sequel to what is it? Well, I don't think it's called Long Live the King, but there's another one too where you play. Is that the one where you swipe? You have like yes, no, and it gives you choices, and you have to like pick with the cards.
No. It's
okay,
different
that's
than
a different
that.
game.
It's no, but it's it's just a kind of simulator essentially.
Okay.
But you choose to train, so you can study, foreign intelligence, or you can study jousting.
Interesting.
And as you go through these different choices, and you can make choices where you essentially control her mental health. So you can have an extremely depressed, extremely angry princess, and it will boost her learning in certain areas.
Okay.
So you it feels horrible sometimes, because you're like, I need her to be lonely and upset and just in a horrible mood always, so that you can level up faster.
Yeah.
And you're going to have wildly different endings to this game.
Miss K. Rose in chat is playing that and says that she's really enjoying it thanks to Steam's spring cleaning. Apparently they have it on sale.
I go back to that game regularly, like
Nice.
when I have a couple hours to kill, and just try to figure out as many different horrific things I can do. And like, well, there's like 30 different deaths you can get.
Mm-hmm. And is there an achievement for getting?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
100%.
And I need them.
Oh, that's funny. Good funny, terrifying funny. For me, I usually don't have too many games where I am presented with those choices. I'm a fan of being lost in a narrative. If folks haven't picked that up yet already from me, but I do remember one, and it reminded me because it was on one of the lists that you sent. Batman Arkham City. It gives you there's a choice where you can either end the game early and just be like, you lost, thank you, or go. A part of the pre-order was you got a Catwoman DLC, which I started playing and I went, I guess the code didn't work, whatever. And you finish a boss battle with the Joker, and it like where Bruce could be dead, and it fades to black, and then it fades up and you're Catwoman. And you're like, I don't want to play this right now at all. So it got to me in a really, really bad time where I was like, this is the worst, possibly the best, possibly the worst. For me at the moment, I was just so into the story and so into the dynamic between Bruce and the Joker that I wasn't ready for Selina to pop up. But especially because it was a stealth sequence. It was all stealth, which for like Assassin's Creed, it's you get caught, you fight your way out, but this was you get caught back to one.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
so
it was
like Last of Us.
Yeah, it was rough. It was so rough. I finally get through it, and she finds out about Bruce, and you can decide either to go save him or I made my money, I can bounce. So I said I made my money, I could bounce, and then they rolled credits. That was the end of the game. And I went, that's bullshit. And then I had to do it again, reload my save, do it again, and make the other choice. To which Selina showed up and saved Bruce right after the fade to black happened in the main story. And one of the few things that wrecked that game for me was that moment. It was just the wrong time, the wrong place to put a decision, where ultimately it did affect the rest of the game, where it was like, you're done. Congratulations. But it was more of a dick thing, like, good, great, good for you. You picked money, and you got an achievement for it, but it was really lame. Yeah. And so Steve, what's up?
I was just saying.
You're really quiet again, boss.
Got it. There we go.
Hey, bud.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, it just reminded me when Pat beat Prey. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, when he beat it early on the station, and he took that other option to just leave the station, and then he got the bad ending.
And that was it.
No.
Well, also the Far Cry, they've done it twice now, where if you listen to the bad guy and you sit and you wait, or however it is in 5, but at least in 4, when Pagan Min says, "Hey, I'll be back in 10 minutes," you wait 10 minutes. You're like, "All right, let's go build this reactor," and you lay your mom to rest, and that's the end of the game. That type of stuff I think is more beneficial to like the lifeblood of a game as opposed to a fake choice. That's something where it's like, hey, thanks for paying attention. We're going to give you a little bit something extra, as opposed to, at least in my case, here's 2 hours or however long it was. It felt like forever. But here's so long to give you something that ultimately doesn't matter. We just made more gameplay stuff as a character that you're not used to playing. That overall, if I didn't have that, wouldn't have affected the story other than she just shows up.
I think the distinction to make that's important when we're talking about like choice in games is the difference in choices that are like small choices that you just kind of make along the way that seem inconsequential that end up actually having consequences, and choices that are put there intentionally for you to think about and weigh the options, and like kind of the fun of that is for you to think about and weigh, in actually finally selecting a choice. And I think in some of those games where that is the way, I don't necessarily like it, but I can see why it doesn't really matter what you choose, because it's not about the outcome. It's about the choice itself.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, so I see some games doing that. One of the reasons why I like Deadfire is because, like I said, there are a lot of choices you make that change the world around you. But there also is, a few changes, especially choices, especially at the end of the game, that lots of big sweeping things happen. It seems, I'm not sure, I haven't finished another playthrough, but it seems like the end is the end no matter what you do. But there's a lot of stuff that happens that kind of you don't get to play afterwards. They're just like, all right, all of this stuff happened because of what you did. But
like
now
it
the game,
closes some stuff
credits
off?
rolls, and then it's over. You just got to start a new game or load up before you ended it. Kind of like a Fallout situation.
Okay.
Um,
Depending on what group you picked.
right.
Yeah.
But again, for me, like as far as like old games, that was one of the reasons why I loved Fable so much. The whole Fable series is that choice of being able to. Excuse me.
Bless you. Woo. That was weird.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
I held it in. Yeah, I love the Fable series for that reason of kind of that being able to choose your choices and how that affects your character. Another game my friends mentioned to me, we were talking about Dishonored, especially Dishonored 2, based on the way that you dispatch enemies and kind of get through the levels.
I was talking about it with Steve
It
before we went
changes
live.
how the level works, right? So if you do the non-violent approach, it stays kind of like a clean, nice, pretty city. But the more people you kill, like the more gritty the whole environment around you gets.
And it's something I'm pretty sure you played too, similarly to Undertale.
Yes.
Based on how you, not even just you start killing bad guys or presumed good guys, or even how you dispose of people.
Right.
That has affected it. And I'm more of a fan of those choices, of being able to choose through gameplay as opposed to here are two people, which one do we kill?
Or who do you
Wolfenstein.
follow in this case?
Yeah.
I like both because I mean there are scenarios like, you look at the Wolfenstein games and in not the one before the most recent one.
The Old Blood? New Gods?
The first one that
Old Blood.
refreshed this.
Sorry,
the
guys.
first one
That's
that
fine.
refreshed.
Yeah.
New Order.
Yes, New
New
Order.
Order. New
You make
Order,
a
Old
choice
Gods.
in the beginning of that changes how you play the rest of the game. There's kind of like two different paths.
Two different paths to take, yeah.
I like stuff like that. I think it's cool. It kind of gives it, refreshes replayability, but also it makes it feel like your choice actually matters. Now, granted, you still kind of get to the same place, but you take a different path. It branches outward, eventually it comes back in. But it's nice that they put that extra time in that the other stuff is there. But I think part of the reason why we get some games where you make a choice and it seems like it doesn't really matter is because that takes a lot of resources
Agreed.
to invest into stuff that some players may never even experience. Some people only play a game once, they make their choices, that's it. And you have all this stuff that essentially you wasted money making.
Well, and especially even from a gamer point of view, for a game that's 40 plus hours, to know that there's a whole other set of choices I could have made, especially in a game that's more branching than just one or two big choices that you make that goes off. To know that there are kind of almost infinite possibilities in this case, that I would have to play this game that has taken, more than 40 hours to complete once. Just as someone who doesn't have enough time to do that for one game, that's kind of devastating to me. I'd want to know all of these storylines, and I can go watch them on YouTube, I guess. But
that's what happened to me with God of War. I was just because I knew I wanted to let one of y'all borrow it, I just went God of War Secret Ending, and then I found out that it's not necessarily a 100% completion ending. That they mention something in dialogue that says, "Oh, go do this." And then it happens. But I just was in a mode of, okay, I'm done. What's the 100% ending? So it's a lot of, I can definitely see that. And when it comes to choices through gameplay where it's more about the choice than the results of that choice, one that comes to mind is Modern Warfare 2 in the airport. Is you have the choice to shoot at the civilians in the airport, or you have the choice to not. And ultimately, what you do in that moment in the overall story doesn't necessarily matter as much as being present for that event.
Right.
But it's more of a decision as the player to make that decision.
Right.
And in a similar vein to that, I was rewatching before I finished God of War, I rewatched God of War 3 as a 2-hour movie, and I forgot how much Kratos just killed civilians. It wasn't just the skeleton warriors from Hades that were coming up and attacking. He was indiscriminately killing all of those people. And back at that time, I was like, cool, great, whatever. But now looking back at that choice that I made to do that, it's like, wow, dick. Like, and not just Kratos, but me for just going, yeah, whatever. I've got these cool chains. Bruh, so angry.
So I think the other thing too, in the conversation about choices that my friend brought up that I hadn't even thought about is also just like little choices you make in terms of just like gameplay choices. So even things like League of Legends, for example, being a jungle player, the whole role is based around decision making and choosing, am I going to focus on top lane or am I going to focus on bot lane? And that influences the route that I take around the map. But then top lane dies before I get there. So now that choice, now I have to make a new choice. And so you kind of get these constantly branching paths that lead you to where the game is, and you get put in situations where, okay, well, I have to make the decision now. Do I try to steal Baron, or do I just let them take it and we turtle? In the same way that in like a game like PUBG, you have to make a choice. Am I going to drop at school, or am and blade it out, or am I going to drop?
Despite how forward that,
are we hear gunshots close to us? Are we going to go towards it and try to take them out? Are we going to take a car and drive the other way? Right? Are we going to ride the edge of the circle? Are we going to drive straight in the middle? Are we going to go for that crate? Things like that are choices, and I think that's why games like that, same thing with like Fortnite, are interesting, because you get those same kind of narrative choices without necessarily, you don't get as much production value.
But you're telling your own story.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
You get immediate choices that you can pretty quickly go back in and redo that choice and try it again in a completely different way.
In a matter of speed.
Yes. Well, you deal with the consequences, and you're allowed to try again. But also, I think part of the reason why games like PUBG and Fortnite and League are so interesting is because of that. Like, you always bring in the knowledge. If you're a smart player and you learn from your mistakes, you always bring in that new knowledge into the game. But it's always a new game. You're always playing against different people. You're never going to be presented with the same choices twice. Like, maybe similar situations, but it's never going to be exactly the same parameters.
At least not for a long time.
Opponent. It's always going to be a different weapon. It's always going to be a different amount of people alive. It's going to be different.
And what they
always
say,
a variable.
If at first you don't succeed, you dust yourself off and try again.
As you just did.
Yeah. Use take two. Something that I just thought of, that if it had existed by the time the movie came out, I'm excited for the future battle royale of Live, Die, Repeat, the Tom Cruise movie.
Oh boy.
Where you just re-instance, but it's the same thing over and over and over again. But there's another choice that I wanted to bring up, going back to God of War. You get button prompts throughout classic God of Wars of like QuickTime events. Like, you would start a kill sequence on a chimera and it would be triangle, square, circle, triangle, X, and then you eviscerate it, yay. And so through this whole time, you have to know you have to press that in order to advance. At the end of the game, when you're killing Zeus, it's like just keep mashing circle, and you keep punching and punching and punching, and then blood splatter on the screen. You keep punching, blood splatter on the screen until it's completely red, but it's still got that button thing. And little did players know the first time through, you can stop after a little while, but you're just fulfilling that revenge. You have the choice to stop. And there's a similar... I'm sorry if this ends up being a spoiler, but it's not. There's a similar decision near the end of God of War where it's like tap circle, and me remembering, like, I killed the shit out of Zeus, and it was just gross and disgusting and rough, where I would do it a little bit and then stop and see if that was all I had to do. And then do it a little bit and stop and see if that was all I had to do, until the story came through and was a re-informing of the choice of, like, yeah, stop, like, yeah, it was a wonderful moment that last week I talked about. There are some moments for God of War fans that inform some of the things that happened in this newest God of War, and that was one of them, where if you didn't have that moment of a complete red screen beating the ever-living crap out of Zeus, you probably would approach that last fight a little bit differently, maybe. But so Stacey, you have the inherent choice to do the single a walk forward of a line of story in a game like a Skyrim or an Assassin's Creed, but you make the choice to learn as much about the world, explore as much about the world. Where does that choice come from?
I mean, if I'm dropped in the middle of a world, I want to know as much about it as possible. I like knowing the background. And I feel like sometimes, especially, I mean, occasionally in games like Skyrim, there's a couple of places I remember discovering that are, not marked on the map, that you just stumble onto someone's house. And you have the choice of if you're going to immediately fight them and kill them or if you're going to make friends. And I'm recalling one of these people who ended up teaching me a whole bunch of bow and arrow skills, because I made friends with her instead of I helped her out instead of killing her. And so I get in these games, even though those choices don't really matter in endgame, especially with Skyrim, because you can choose the Empire or the Stormcloaks. So you do have a branching choice in that. It does make little moment-to-moment differences. Another one, I guess, is, who you make friends with. Horizon Zero Dawn is another one.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference in the end scene. How many quests you complete, how many people you make friends with. Again, if you kill someone or spare them, they'll show up later on.
Yeah, they'll show up for that last boss fight. Depending on how many groups you help, it could really, really help that last fight.
You can have a full crew on hand there to help you out. Or, if you've made enemies of everybody and chosen all the nasty dialogue choices.
Yeah, and actually that brings up a good point. As is per usual with me, I forget a lot about Horizon Zero Dawn, but ultimately that was one of the ones where I didn't really waver when it came to my decisions. I always went with. So one of the things that actually I think kind of soured the experience a little bit, and I know you didn't play too much of it, Nate. Did you ever get to a choice where it would show brain, heart,
or force, strength,
or like a fist or something? So they would label the decisions in there. What was the game? There's
an
one
option to turn that on in Deadfire.
Oh, is there? To know what your
so you
what
can
your
see the
responses are?
compassionate
to what kind of temperament is applied to each.
Because that was one of the
aggressive.
things.
This is the passive one.
Yeah,
this is the friendly one.
That was one of the, actually. God, I didn't like LA Noire for that reason. Because
you couldn't tell.
You couldn't tell. It would be like, oh, listen, I have to talk to you. Hey, fucker. It would be
the dialogue option sounds great, and I appreciated
they fixed that by the way.
Yeah, I know the update. They made it like they just said what the emotions were as opposed to the lines of dialogue. But when it came to Horizon, that ultimately helped my decision making. But because I ended up going with my I think my heart. Ultimately, I ended up picking the heart a little bit more.
I was the reasonable, rational one most
with the brain.
of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So that sort of simplifies what the dialogue is and what the choice means and what that ends up becoming. And ultimately, I didn't think about the fact that me going to all of these different groups and having a positive effect on them is what brought them to the end battle. I thought it was just, these are just the people that are here at the end battle.
No, you collect your allies.
Your folks, yeah. I didn't do too many side missions, but maybe there's enough in the main story to get you at least the basics for that final boss.
Yeah, there are some that you can't help but run into.
Yeah.
That you'll encounter no matter what, and you usually have to positively complete their parts. So. Yeah.
But that was one where ultimately, aside from the final boss, that was one where I didn't think that my choices really mattered. But
overall, I agree with you. Just for who shows up at the end, and I can think that happens in Final Fantasy too. In Final Fantasy 15, not for the main end battle, but for a extra side battle where you fight the giant, enormous turtle thing. So you could have everyone's help or no one's help.
Okay. Folks in chat, if you're watching us live, or if you're not watching us live, you can be watching us live on inventoryfullpt on Twitch. So twitch.tv/inventoryfullpt. Make sure to follow, and if you have a Twitch Prime subscription available, give us a subscription. We've got a couple of fun emotes, and it helps support the show. We're going to be making some improvements, some changes. Thanks to all of the people that have been subscribing and providing bits. Thank you very much. And we do stream throughout the week. Stacey's been streaming Overwatch. I've been streaming Minecraft. I'm going to try to make the Minecraft at least as much of a weekly thing as I possibly can until my creation is complete. But we appreciate everybody who watches live, and it helps us follow the conversation or bring the conversation around and possibly pivot to something that we didn't think about. So if you're live in chat right now, let us know if there's a game that you played that you thought the choices were really important or really mindful, really impactful. Because similarly, it's one of the reasons why I can't play the Telltale games too much, is because a lot of the times, it doesn't really matter. The most recent one I played was Minecraft Story Mode, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to play the Game of Thrones one because my wife is really into Game of Thrones, and
I want to play that one too.
Yeah.
Even though ultimately none of your choices in that one matter.
I've tried to play that one a few times.
Then not good.
It hasn't stuck.
Especially with now, since they're all licensed, it's really hard to except for, The Walking Dead did have original characters in it and some comic characters as well. So they established early on that it was separate from the TV show and separate from the comic universe in terms of like plot and what happens in time periods and areas and things like that. So that was their way of going, no, everything matters. But then I wish they would remake the Back to the Future one, because if they did it in sort of the modern Telltale style, it would feel a little bit better. The Batman one too was kind of I didn't play it, but I worked on a show that played it. But yeah, the Telltale ones is like, hey, choice, and then ultimately it's not. It's still the story that they want to tell.
Yeah, well, it's that storybook, choose your own adventure, but those always had the same endings at the end, even though there was lots of different ways to get there in the middle.
Yeah, especially for Walking Dead season 1. It's like ultimately this has to happen. This is going to happen, and it's whether you can or not. Candace Grant, I'm late, but throwing these oldies but goodies for choice. Knights of the Old Republic, very good. Though with the way that the first one ends, like ultimately that you do land on that. That's what ends up happening with that, and I still don't want to spoil that game because it's such a good thing. Miss K Rose, I've played a handful of visual novels, and while I feel like my choices matter, I hate having to wait to make a choice. Yeah, I could see that. And it was the same with Hadoful Boyfriend for me. I'm kidding, never played it, but it was funny. It's funny playing Dream Daddy. And I've still only played it once.
Your
but
choices matter.
Choices definitely do matter. But playing that with my wife, which was very interesting, and I'm excited to go back and play it again. But it was just like, did we just have a one-night stand with this guy? I think we did. And then it's like, achievement, you're a bad dad. Damn it, no, what did we do? What? No, go back, revert.
Wow.
Go back to old
this
save.
was a really interesting storyline you created.
Yeah, Richard, yeah, he's a bad boy. Anyway, but yeah, it's weird because initially, I said at the top of the conversation, I don't remember a lot, and then it ends up being a lot more than I thought.
There's a lot of games I can think of that you have choices in
that mean something.
that do mean something.
What was there ever a choice that either of y'all made that stuck with you, like the fact that you made that choice or didn't make that choice?
I want to say yes, but I can't think of anything, so no.
No, okay.
Empire.
Yeah. Oh,
The choices at the end. That ending just, and that ends up being, even though you play the same beats in the story that is told at the end is wildly different depending on your choices. Yeah, and so and because you can technically succeed or fail in that game. I haven't played both ways.
Okay.
I've just finished it. But I suppose you could fail if you don't keep up, like if you don't choose the right people to ascend or you don't win all of your matches. So that does end up being pretty choice heavy, and the narrative that they weave at the end is extremely specific to the choices that you make. So that could play out any number of ways.
And that's another one, Pyre. You're making a choice after every game.
Yeah, and so actually one of the choices that I did make, I let one of the enemies win in a big important match, and she got to go free. And so the little ending blurb about her, I was like, oh, yeah. I don't know. It
Made the
kinda
right
stuck
decision?
with me. I did.
Ooh,
Regret it.
I do just want to give a shout out to Crusader Kings, which is a game literally about making choices that span generations.
Well, I would say Civ too,
yeah,
but it's Civ is so iterative too.
you don't really make choices.
But I think those choices
you
don't necessarily
gather
matter.
resources and you build things.
And depending
Right.
on who you ally
Whereas,
with or
like,
make war with.
Right, because with Crusader Kings, it really matters like who you ally with, who you marry your kids to,
Thought of another one.
and then who those kids, how many kids do they have, and like who do they get married to, and what alliances get formed, and then you get, because the game can span like 1,000 years. You get 100 years later, like, oh, your great grandson now has a claim on one of your lands, and he's also the king of France now, and now he's like, oh, hey man, I want that. And it's like, bro, I don't even know you, but
He's a distant relative.
50 years ago I was like, man, I gotta marry them to somebody in France. So stuff like that I
This
think
is how
is
they
super
get you.
interesting too.
Choosing to date Solus in Dragon Age Inquisition stuck with me because of things I don't want to spoil. Okay, yeah, that's fair. I just remembered one of my favorite games for the PlayStation 3 that is all about choices, and that was Infamous. I loved Infamous, and the main thing is you either choose to be a good guy or a bad guy, and if you want to play with all of the best toys, you either have to go full good or full bad. And I was trying to 100% that game. I never did, but one of the easy ones without having to start all the way back over was, even though I had cleared every single area and I was a good guy, to go full bad, you just had to beat up civilians, blow up property, things like that. But as I was doing it, I was hating it. I was hating myself because I was like, no, these folks look at me as like a good guy, and now they're throwing like Molotov cocktails at me. I could not do the bad stuff in that game.
What you're saying is you wouldn't enjoy Westworld.
I would not enjoy Westworld.
Does that make me a bad person that, like, anytime I'm in those open world games with a bunch of civilians, like, I don't like make a point to do that, but when you reach that point where like you've had a long session, you're like, all right, I'm winding down. I'm not going to do another mission. I'm just kind of walking around, and then I just start killing people. Like, it just usually happens. Blow some shit up, shoot some civilians.
It depends on the game for me. For Infamous, because it was so tied with establishing this identity as a hero for these people in a crisis situation, like, and helping establish food and supplies to a city.
What did you do at the end? Did you?
All good, like all 100% good
Okay.
stuff. Like, no, and for Infamous 2 and Second Son and all of that stuff, I didn't like. I even looked at some of the powers and went,
So Second Son is a sequel of Infamous 2, right?
yeah. So they took the data of.
So they just does it assume the good ending, or is it the
It
bad
assumed
ending?
one of the endings.
Which one?
I'm not gonna say.
Oh, come on.
Play it. Play
I'm
it.
not gonna play it.
Too bad.
So I don't know.
Then sucks to be you. But they looked at the player data. They looked at.
Okay, but I want to know if you killed all the humans or if you killed all the superhumans.
Anyway, let me get to the point.
Okay.
And it goes with the theme. Sucker Punch took the choices that folks made at the end of Infamous 2. They looked at the trophy data and over a period of time, and whoever did most of either the good or the bad ending, that was the canon ending. So they left it up to the player base to go, all right, well, Cole's dead, and how he died and the things around his death, whatever. How are we going to move forward with the story? Is it going to be Cole? Is it going to be a new protagonist? And it's a new protagonist because Cole died and has stayed dead. And that's something that they talked about in Second Son, where Cole is dead and he stayed dead. But it affected how the world went forward with treating the superhuman gene, not the X gene. But yeah, I Infamous was a game all about choice, but I couldn't bring myself to making the wrong one.
What? Go ahead.
So, well, speaking of that wrong choice, so going back to Undertale for a second, you don't necessarily know that you have a choice at the beginning of that game. Someone had to tell me I had a choice. I mean, I would have just blindly started fighting, probably, because that's what you're generally coded to do in a video game. So, you get through the first couple fights and you discover that you have a choice. You can't go back with a game like Undertale.
You can't clear the save.
You cannot.
No.
Because you try to, and you start again, and they remember.
They remember. It's terrifying.
Horrifying.
A game that remembers.
But so, yeah, when you're not presented with a clear choice like that, sometimes you don't know until you've already made the first choice and like started yourself down a pathway. And in a lot of the games, it's hard to go back from there.
Yeah. Agreed. But that was the thing with Infamous, where it was save a cat stuck in a tree or burn the tree. So it was very clearly defined what the good and the bad choices were. So that it wasn't like, ha, gotcha. So it was helpful, but it was also just like, use your head. If you want to be a bad guy, be a bad guy. But if not, whatever.
Well, talking about that too also reminded me of one of the cool features in Deadfire is how it is a sequel to the first Pillars game, and that game had a lot of decisions and stuff too. You had a very big role in kind of how the world played out, and you made a lot of decisions throughout the course of the game. And because of that, you can import your save, and it drastically affects how the rest of the game
Keeps those choices.
plays out. Yeah, and what's really cool is it even shows you in certain dialogue conversations, there's like a little marker that says this is because of the decisions that you made in the first Pillars game. And it's nice because they offer a nice kind of easy, because I didn't play the first game, I know what happened, but I didn't play the first game. They give you a nice selection of like basically like, here's what you did. You did everything good. You did everything kind of even. You did everything bad. Mm-hmm. You did this, like basic kind of generalizations. But you can also go and do a custom like and run through almost every situation and like side stuff too. And like, what did your companions do? Did you finish their quest? Did they die? Like stuff like that. And then when you load it up, when you start the game, some of those people are not there. Some of them are there. Some of them are happy to see you. Some of them are not.
I'm about it, man.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's killer. Any final thoughts about choices in games and decisions? Anything that you would recommend in terms of a game where you can where choices matter?
I mean, I recommend New Vegas if nobody's played it, but I really recommend Deadfire if you're into classic RPGs, even a little bit. If you're into Dungeons and Dragons, if you like good voice acting and you like story.
How does this compare to what was the other one?
Divinity.
Divinity, yeah.
Divinity. Actually, I forgot to tell you about this to add on the news. They announced they're doing a definitive edition. It just launched for Xbox.
Yeah, I knew that it was coming to console.
And PC is going to get the update of all. Apparently, there's the changes are in the thousands. They've said of like quality of life changes and stuff like that. So I'm excited to jump into it again. I never finished it. The group I was playing with, we stopped playing with it. I'm throwing shade at you guys. So I really want to finish it. I kind of want to do a solo game, but it's also been so fun multiplayer that I'd rather just like finish the one we started. But I'm excited for that. In terms of like, that game is fun in a different way. Mm-hmm. It's fun in that it also gives you a lot of choices in terms of like different things that you can do, but the Pillars really made me feel like I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with like a DM who was like reading the story to me and like doing different voices for the characters and stuff. And even the way the party just kind of talks to themselves as things are happening, like based on what's going around, or even when you do something and someone stops and wants to talk to you afterwards and be like, yo, are you going to do this all the time? Should I leave? Like, what's going on? It was really cool. It felt very immersive and alive. And that's something I haven't felt from a game in a while. Divinity looks great. I like the turn-based combat better. I like the story and what they're doing, but in terms of like the conversation stuff, I don't think it's on the same level. I think Deadfire does that way better.
Okay, cool. Stacey, is there one that comes to mind?
I mean, I'll throw Pyre out there now, since I think that you can have a plethora of kind of endings, and that really gives you the freedom to follow the same exact gameplay like elements, but you could have drastically different endings.
And it's real fun.
Yeah, and you can craft your own very personalized set of stories based on the characters that you identify with.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
I would also I like that world a lot, to the point where a Pyre animated series or something like that. But then that takes the choice away from you.
Yes. Well,
the only thing that left that I would have to say is choice. Choice does matter to me in a game, and when I started playing The Last of Us way back when, I didn't like the character that Noel was. And because that was a representation of me and how I was playing, I didn't like how some of the choices that Noel made were out of my control. And ultimately, I ended up stopping playing the game. I watched the ending, and I saw the decision that or Joel made. Is it Joel or is it Noel? Joel. Duh. And part of the reason I'm mentioning this is because Patrick isn't here. I ended up seeing the decision that Joel made, and I didn't like it. I didn't want to be that person. That's not me. If a game is supposed to reflect my decisions, yes, it's a narrative to, hey, you're just walking in this person's shoes. Mm-hmm. That is to say, if there was a Last of Us movie, I'll be there. I'll watch a Last of Us movie, but you're not going to see me making that decision that he made.
And it's a lot harder when it's you and you've put these hours and hours and hours of gameplay only to come to a decision that you don't agree with or wouldn't personally make. It's a lot more personal.
And similarly to like the Mass Effect thing, where it's like I made all of these decisions, but I wouldn't choose any of this. Mm-hmm. And I did think there was a bit of a huge, way too over the top backlash when it came to that. But ultimately, it's that same thing of all of the stuff that I did as a player ended up meaning nothing because you wrote yourself into a corner. Or, the decision that was made for Last of Us leading into Last of Us 2 may make Last of Us 2 better, and I may like Last of Us 2 better than I ever would have liked Last of Us 1. But when it comes to games with choices, I like when it's clear about it, and if there's a highlight from this generation that you can play pretty easily, I would say Infamous Second Son. It was one of my first absolute must-buys on the PlayStation 4, and it was a really early release in the life cycle of the PlayStation 4, so it's definitely been a minute. It still looks real pretty. Actually, I haven't played it on the Pro yet. It takes place in Seattle, so it's rainy and gorgeous in that game. So I have it on PlayStation Plus because it was free like a month or two back. So I would recommend that. I don't know what Patrick would recommend, but Steve, Steve in the booth?
I know what Patrick would recommend.
What would Patrick recommend?
The Witcher.
Yeah, that's right, Witcher. Yeah, good choice. Yeah. Steve, what would you recommend?
That is a hilarious segue because I still have yet to play The Witcher.
Oh, that's right. That's right. No, but you had it though, didn't you?
I've started it a few times, but
yeah, I still have it. I download my games from my PS4, so they're all sitting on the hard drive or on the servers.
Can't get past that first hour.
But which one? What would you recommend, Steve?
I would recommend the Deus Ex series just because I'm a big fan of that world and that style of storytelling. It matches well to the gameplay and the elements that they put into the director's cut of Human Revolution a handful of years ago actually came full circle to the fan requests of that game when it originally came out, saying that they could not actually do non-lethal boss fights. And so when the director's cut of that had come out, they put all that in, and they also added a director's cut narrative throughout the whole game while you're playing it. And artistically and thematically, I would recommend that next to Mass Effect. Again, the original trilogy. That's one of the reasons why I still have a PS3.
The Ridge Tridge.
Yeah.
And that was not to go too far off the rails, but since Mass Effect 1 didn't come out on the PlayStation 3, Mass Effect 2 started with a truncated version similar to what Nate mentioned about Pillars of Eternity of Mass Effect 1 to get all of those decisions in, right?
That is correct, and they also did the same for Mass Effect 3.
Yeah, okay. Very cool.
Very cool. Even Mass Effect 3, just to reiterate one more thing on that, because I have not seen it done in any other game, but they did have a decision when you started the game, not just for the background of storyline, but a decision as to what you wanted to be more narratively focused with the gameplay while you were playing it. Because you could play it where it would just randomly select the different elements of the story and you just watch what happens.
Oh, that's cool.
Or you could have it more narratively focused towards the choices that you made in the game with the characters and the storyline, and have easier gameplay. And I've not seen options like that done in a game since.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Very cool. Thank you for sharing, Steve.
Of course.
And thank you everybody in chat for joining us and sharing your 2 cents. I liked having time to discuss something like this and I hope that we can have more time in the future. Tell the fine folks at Popcorn Talk, and we can get more studio time. Or we need to figure out a way to do discussions like these out of studio. Yeah, let's do that.
Yes.
But thank you to everybody.